Also on HBO tonight at the Forum in Inglewood was Jezreel Corrales taking on Robinson Castellanos in a defense of Corrales' WBA World Super Featherweight Championship. And it was a really good fight between these two. Very much back and forth all the way through. Eventually wound up getting called in a technical decision after a clash of heads. There were several clashes of heads in the fight. But this one in particular in the 10th round wound up opening up. There was a slight cut underneath Castellanos' right eye from an earlier clash of heads, and this last clash of heads wound up just busting it wide open. It was really a nasty cut. It was on the level of like Vitaly Klitschko against Lennox Lewis. So, the doctor had no choice but to stop the fight, given how deep and bloody, the leak in the cut was. And, they went to the scorecards. Corrales came through with a technical decision, a majority technical decision. One judge had it 94-94 a draw. Another judge had it 94-93, and then the last judge had it 96-92. I definitely think that 96-92 was a little bit too wide. And as a matter of fact, when I was hearing those scores, I was thinking that Castellanos was actually going to get the decision, because on my card I had Castellanos up. I thought he should have been up by like a point or two going into that round, especially being that he had managed to drop Corrales in the 4th round twice. And, of course, Corrales was able to eventually come back and drop Castellanos in the 7th round. And, it was just a really good rough and tumble fight between the two of them. First couple of rounds, Corrales kind of got off to a good start, a start that I felt like he was going to get off to. As I mentioned in my preview video, I felt like Corrales was going to be just a step ahead of Castellanos the whole night. And at the very least, in the very beginning of the fight, he was. He was definitely a little bit quicker to the punch. Was leading a little bit more. Castellanos was like still trying to counter him, but he hadn't quite found the timing yet. Once it hit into the 3rd, though, Castellanos had found the timing, and not only did he find the timing, but he was actually kind of feigning and setting some traps for Corrales. He would like feint in one direction, and then feint in another direction, throw a punch, and he would catch Corrales, where Corrales would kind of like bend over, bend down. Corrales has kind of that Anselmo Moreno, or like that Pernod Whitaker type of style, where he's trying to be like real slithery and fluid about his style. And the thing is, it can be especially difficult to catch a guy like that with more of like an orthodox technical boxing style. But Castellanos isn't really like an orthodox technical type of fighter. As you saw, or as you could have seen when he fought Celestino Caballero, when he fought Ronnie Rios, when he fought Yorikis Gamboa. He actually is really good at fighting guys that fight like Corrales does. Guys that are like very finesse and try to work a lot on athleticism, and just being able to be like real fancy with their footwork, and just being like kind of like real quick twitch, like fast twitch muscle in and out, snappy with their feet and snappy with their punches, trying to catch you with those shots you don't see. A lot of times Castellanos is actually really good at timing fighters like that, as he did against Gamboa especially, and being able to just kind of catch them and feint them is like where he wants them to move, and then catching them like in the process of them moving in that direction, and then timing them and just setting that trap for him and nailing them with just very impressive accuracy. He was doing it with really good regularity against Corrales, I thought, through pretty much like the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Corrales was definitely still doing his own work in his own right, but I thought the shots coming from him were a little bit too few and far between in those rounds. He was still looking to kind of finesse things, and Castellanos was just making it a bit more of a rough fight, and just the constant movement of Castellanos' hands and the feinting that he was doing was really throwing Corrales off. It's like Corrales was kind of falling for the feints, almost like if you were playing basketball and like somebody like kind of jukes to the right or jukes to the left, and then like you kind of eat that that bait that they're putting out there, and then they kind of go to your right, to the opposite side of you, and they're able to kind of get past you on the way to the basket. That's kind of what Castellanos was doing. Is like he would kind of feint in one direction, get Corrales to move where he wanted him to be, and then he would throw that punch where he was predicting that Corrales was going to move into. Just really clever stuff from Castellanos. Something that he managed to pick up in the midst of all those losses that he racked up. The guy with double-digit losses, you wouldn't necessarily expect him to have a boxing brain, boxing IQ that's that high, but some guys, they manage to learn from their mistakes, learn from their opposition, learn on the job, basically. It's like a guy with a GED getting thrown into a like a high performing, like high management job at a big company or something, and then them kind of working out the kinks, and they might falter at first a little bit, but I mean if they're clever about it, if they have enough street smarts about them, they might be able to get through it. And that's pretty much what Castellanos largely did in his career. He fought through a lot of adversity and managed to come out the better person for it, a better fighter for it. It's proven to be just one of the best spoilers really in the sport in recent years. And he damn near pulled off another one here against Corrales. I mean, personally, I thought that he probably maybe should have gotten the decision. I mean, I'm not really arguing too much against Corrales getting the decision. I mean, it was a pretty much dead even fight going into that 10th round. It's kind of unfortunate that that final head clash kind of ruined things, because even the earlier head clashes didn't really mar the fight very much. I mean, yeah, it did open up that slight cut, what was initially a slight cut underneath Castellanos' eye, and then also a cut on the outside of Corrales' right eyebrow, as well as I think there was another cut just above Castellanos' right eye as well. But I mean, that being said, like, the cuts weren't really bad. They weren't bleeding heavily or anything, and it didn't seem like those head clashes necessarily really dissuade either fighter from being able to institute their game plan in the fight. It didn't really affect the strategy of the fight per se. But I mean, that last one is basically just kind of what ruined it, kind of made the fight anticlimactic in what could have been a really epic last 3 rounds of the fight. I mean, this was definitely one of the closer fights, most competitive fights of the year, really. Not necessarily the most action-packed, because it was a little bit more of like a technical kind of a chess match type fight, but it was a very high-paced, high-action, high IQ kind of chess match between two fighters of styles that you don't necessarily get to see every day. Two guys with a particular skill set that's almost unique unto them. It's very stuff that's very hard to really teach somebody. It's almost like you either have to kind of have it imbued in you within from birth, or something that you just have to kind of pick up along the way and be able to just learn and improvise on your way of pursuing your career and such. But I mean, just a fantastic effort from both fighters. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Jezreel Corrales, he beat the man in the division, who was Takashi Uchiyama, and he is the man of the division. I mean, I'm still rating him number 1. I think that there is somewhat of an argument that you could maybe place Berchelt above him, considering that Berchelt clearly defeated Francisco Vargas and clearly just defeated Takashi Miura, which is 2 really, really damn good wins. But I do still think that Corrales defeating Uchiyama, especially in their first fight, being able to repeat the action in their second fight, albeit by decision, and then even being able to get a close decision here against Castellanos, still should have him just slightly above Berchelt in the 130-pound rankings, just because of the fact that, I mean, Corrales, he's an unheralded, underrated fighter. I mean, he's a guy that, even though he normally campaigns at featherweight, has proven to be a spoiler at pretty much whatever weight you throw him in there at. I mean, he fought Yurikas Gamboa at lightweight. Gamboa was trying to make his way back into title contention, and I mean, he basically set the odds and sent him back to the drawing board, or possibly even maybe retirement at this point. But I mean, Castellanos, I'm sure, like, if he was to go back down to featherweight, he could very easily find himself back into contention, into becoming like a mandatory challenger for any of the titleists at 126, and I think he's extremely live against any of those guys. I wouldn't count. I think it's basically a 50-50 fight between him against any of them. Gary Russell, Oscar Valdez, Neil Santa Cruz. I think he beats Lee Selby. I think he just plain beats him. That's all there is to it. I think probably the worst style matchups for him at that weight would probably be Leo Santa Cruz, because Castellanos doesn't really like being pushed backwards, and Santa Cruz would give him that pressure that gives Castellanos a lot of trouble. It seems like that Escandon was able to give him, that Rene Alvarado was able to give him. Another guy that I wouldn't really like his chances against would be Jorge Lara. I think Lara is just a terrible style matchup for him. Just wouldn't match up well against him at all. So incidentally, I would be surprised if he wound up getting kind of thrown to the wolves against him, almost the way he was earlier in his career. But I mean, the thing is, he has kind of his little connection with Golden Boy now. He's been on Golden Boy cards recent years, so I mean, he might be able to make something happen. Hopefully, for his sake. I mean, he's a really good fighter, and I think he definitely deserves the opportunities, more so than his record would necessarily give somebody a reason to believe. As for Corrales, I mean, like I said, he's the man of the division. Considering the fact that Lomachenko is on his diva shit, and HBO is very much gassing him up at every opportunity, and allowing him to do that, basically allow him to get away with murder, ostensibly. You know, Corrales versus Burchelt, I think, is really the most logical fight to happen. Number 1 versus number 2, two best fighters in the division. Two very different styles, and I think you know, the way the styles might match up could make a really interesting fight. I mean, Burchelt tends to be a little bit more textbook, a bit more in the classical style. You know, very fleet-footed, however. You know, definitely not a cement-footed guy. But you know, tends to be a bit more on the orthodox side, whereas you know, Corrales tends to be a little bit more improvisational, as I said before, like more of that Whitaker or Moreno esque treatment that he gives to his style. And you know, I think that would make for a good fight. You know, Corrales looking to kind of catch Burchelt with the snappy shots that he doesn't see. Burchelt just looking to hammer away, you know, behind the jab and land those just ruthless aggression, destructive kind of wrecking ball type shots, you know, like where it's like he doesn't even have to hit you cleanly to hurt you. I mean, like you could just tell that he's doing damage just off of making contact. I think that's a very intriguing, interesting fight that those two could have. And I mean, fuck it. I mean, Lomachenko is going to be doing whatever he wants to do, and he's going to get away with whatever he wants to get away with. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, he's not even necessarily a factor in the division unless he chooses to make himself one by fighting either fighter, you know. And until he does that, you know, fuck it. Corrales and Burchelt are the number 1 and the number 2 in the 130-pound division, and that's all there is to it. But I mean, all that said, I will get you guys on the next one. Peace.